Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Thought Team Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. This is episode 184, a very special episode as we are on site here at Skalawag Productions. We are also with a dear friend and member of the Navigating Now community, Mark Skala. Welcome to the show. Thank you for having us live on site.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we're so thrilled to be on site. We are so well connected with a lot of small businesses here in Chicago. And when we can get to know the business from a people perspective, great. But when we get to kind of stand at the center of their work and their practitionership, it gets really, really exciting. So we're on site today in Mark's studio, if you will. Mark is growing a creative agency here in Chicago, growing a team, working with new types of clients, and getting really creative with storytelling. Is really at the center of what you do, and that's the center of today's episode 184. We're going to be talking about storytelling and particularly how we can drive better outcomes with storytelling. But first, Mark, say hello.
Hey, everybody. How are you doing?
And we want to get to know you a little bit better. For those folks who don't know you and who haven't seen you here on Navigating Now, share a story for us. And I have gotten to know you well as an entrepreneur. We've been able to really connect through the experience of building a business.
Yeah.
I'm curious, tell us a story of when you knew that you were on the right path in building a business.
Yeah. It's a really interesting one, I think. At the end of the day, I've been trying to do sort of the video production photography game for since college, almost 15 years at this point. And there's been moments when you're a young professional sort of lost in the world and not sure which way to go, because there's this path that is promised. Then you realize very quickly that that's not how it works. And so there's been multiple moments in my career where all of a sudden, wow, maybe this is actually a practical use of my time or a practical path for me to become an entrepreneur, to run my own shop. And there is a moment when I knew this is something that I wanted to be doing. I was actually working another job. I worked for Northwestern University for many years and ran an academic production studio over there before making the leap to here. And right before I ended that job and made the official leap, I got the opportunity to go to Jordan, the country of Jordan, and shoot documentary stories about a couple different, for an NGO, on a couple different people that were doing great work in the Middle East. And one of these people ran a company, an organization called Souk Al Tayyib. And it basically was something where they brought women from different Muslim backgrounds, so Shiite and Sunni Muslims, and actually had them cook together and build a meal together. And the idea was you can resolve your differences and you can understand the other, right? Through food. And you can realize that actually we're not so different after all.
Yeah.
And that was like a moment in my life, both from a personal and a business perspective, where I was like, oh, this is beyond me. Right.
Yeah.
And what it showed me is it's actually built that feeling and that idea of like extending the table and breaking bread and learning about people through food. I mean, we have done that before.
We have.
And that idea of hospitality and eating together, that is part of our company values of what we've built. And so like that is one of those moments that has really been an unknowingly a guiding light and principle in how I've thought about building things, how I feel like we treat people, how we expect to treat each other here. And I think that's one of the things that I would always look back on as being a memorable it's just an inspiration to me.
It's so funny, or I think very interesting, that at the center of every great story is an emotion. And as you were even telling that story, the moment in that story that really stood out to me was this image of, these incredible women breaking bread around this table and, passing on traditions and culture and heritage. And that essentially in sparking or informing an entrepreneurial venture for you. I always tell the story for me, I'm a lifelong learning practitioner. I love the learning experience. And for me as a child, going with my mother to her third grade classroom in the summers to help set up the classroom, those were the moments that were so formative for me. And I can take myself back to that moment where I was in such awe of just the physical environment and the different zones that my mother would set up to create great learning experiences. And that somehow is woven into the ethos and even the working dynamics of Thoughtium as a learning and development design and facilitation company. So, I think, one of the first things that maybe we're highlighting here is that all great stories do have a little bit of that emotional connection or that emotional tie. And we could be bringing a lot more of that into our storytelling, whether that's amongst family and friends, or as maybe what we're going to talk about today in our professional lives, the power of storytelling and some of the outcomes. Let's dive into storytelling a little bit, because particularly at Thoughtium, we're really focused on bringing storytelling to our clients in different ways. It comes through in our brand and the story that we tell, and frankly, a lot of our corporate clients are asking for more specific training and upskilling on the art of storytelling. So let's unpack storytelling. Why is storytelling so important? And what do some of your clients come to you to kind of solve for through storytelling?
Yeah. It's multifaceted. The core of it is often we're trying to change people's minds or to inspire, to create action. And sometimes that is in purchasing decisions, and that's not as romantic to talk about,
but it's real.
But it's real. And also sometimes it's about a broader idea of how do we change the narrative. And I'll give you an example. We just finished up and released in April a documentary series with the Tourism Board of Chicago called The 77 City of Neighborhoods. Check it out if you're interested in Chicago culture, food, that sort of thing. And what we are trying to do is help establish and change a narrative of what preconceived notions people have about different neighborhoods in the city that maybe they haven't gone to. And this is not about, the Lincoln Parks of the world is a great neighborhood and it has its own story. These are about neighborhoods that really don't necessarily are either not on people's radars or have, maybe negative connotations or one thing or another, or you just don't know about it. Right. And so how do you sort of meet people where they are and help them understand? And this is our food hook, where we take them on a journey to flavor and interesting people who have been working really hard, but they maybe just don't know about it. Right. And so then you dive into the history and culture of a neighborhood. And with that history and culture is conflict. And it's not sunshine and roses. And you need great characters. You need conflict and emotional development. And you have to have that dip in order to come back out the other side. And that element is probably the most important part of the story. Now, obviously, when you're doing like an ad for a business and you're telling a story, you're not necessarily going to be talking about doom and gloom or bad history or something, but you might be talking about friction in a sales process. And so those are some of the ways where you can really apply it to business outcomes and business problems.
I love that. That kind of dip that you're talking about, oftentimes we refer to as relevant tension, as we think is such a key ingredient to kind of the storytelling matrix. We also know, and I love your idea of like storytelling can be a lever for changing behavior or changing minds, changing purchasing habits. It also can be a wonderful way of really getting to the why behind a thing, a product or a service. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, especially like if you had a client that maybe came in and they were struggling to differentiate, or they were struggling to really compel people to understand their product or their story. Like, what are some of the things that we can do to help bolster the value proposition or the why?
What makes you real? What makes you different? What makes you, and it's not different from a differentiation perspective, but it's like, is there a great story of the founding of the brand? And so when we're doing work with clients and really diving into like discovery of all this, we're asking questions that really lead you to understand, what is it about you that's in this company that's special? Because it's not just like paper pushers and like employees in cubicles. Like, what are the things that make we like to refer to it as pulling back the curtain. And actually, when we were thinking about like doing all our social media and things like that, like that's often what we're trying to do. And like what we're doing right now is like letting you into the show of the inner workings of what you don't necessarily know, because you're not in that business. And so how do we find those relational moments in brand storytelling specifically, where it's either interesting, powerful, moving, those types of words where we're trying to really narrow down on that stuff and then be able to sort of pull that out. And then it's our job to help tell that story in a way that's like, checks the marketing boxes and things like that. But that's the stuff that's real. And people know when you're full of crap, like if you keep moving on being full of crap. Like no way will people buy into that. Everyone has a PhD in watching television in America. You know what I mean? So
I love that. So what I'm hearing you say is that, storytelling can be a way to translate the value proposition or a differentiator. So, for example, we work with a lot of firms in helping them create long-term vision statements. These are really big statements in terms of where organizations are heading in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. Great vision statements are short, they are clear, they're compact, they say a lot, they're meaningful. But at the end of the day, they're just words on a page. One of the activities that we have our clients then go through once they strike a very exciting vision statement is we immediately get them telling stories about how this vision has shown up in their work or how they foresee the vision showing up as well too. So much like your example, oftentimes we'll have clients come to us with a problem or maybe a value proposition that they're having a hard time conveying to their customers or their clients. And we incite a little bit of that creativity through just getting them telling stories, because it's the stories that we connect to, not necessarily the words on a slide. And that's something that I think we share in common in our businesses.
Yeah. Actions speak louder than words, and storytelling in a lot of ways is a representation of action. Right. And sometimes it can just be words, but especially if it's from the heart, if it is from experience, that is something that people resonate with. And that's, it's really hard to fake that a lot of the time.
Yeah. I love that. My co-founder, Norm, we were talking about this episode today, and he asked a really compelling question. He said, because in our business, in Thoughtium, we have a little bit of like an inside joke around how we have operators and we have artists on our team, right? We have the creatives that, every day wake up and want to tell stories. And then we have the operators that just get really excited about the execution in the black and white of our business. Norm asked today, he said, do you need to be an artist or a creative to tell great stories? And I'm curious as to your thoughts on that.
Do you have all day? I literally think about this all the time, because the answer is absolutely no.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in, we like to separate people very in binary ways, right? I think we've experienced this, especially in the last 5 to 6 years, in terms of like, your left brain or your right brain, or you're creative or you're not. And I think one of the age-old lessons that I've learned in my career and in my life has been that like that doesn't really exist or apply, and everything is gray. And so really what you have to do is take the opportunity to find a genuine moment that you're inspired by. And stories can be told in a variety of ways. It does not have to be in video production or journalism or on TikTok. It can be anywhere you are. And I think even the origins of storytelling around a campfire, right?
Sure.
Those are the things that resonate. And there are moments that you have with a friend, and maybe you don't have an audience watching you, that you're telling a story that makes their life a little bit better. And so I would argue that there is no left brain, right brain like requirement for storytelling. You just need to find something that moves you. And the story comes from there.
And learn a lot about it. So one of the things that comes to my mind is maybe the most extreme example of this kind of, binary nature of like, do you have to be a creative to tell stories, would be you look at data, right? Oftentimes data is looked at this kind of like black and white. It's in spreadsheets. You either know it or you don't know it. But I would argue that some of the best business operators out there know how to tell the story through data as well too. And for them, that means bringing the complex nature of big data sets or financial statements forward in a way that most people can understand them. So if you are more of an operator, sometimes it's just adding clarity and simplicity to a very complex piece of work. It doesn't necessarily need to have, the front, middle, and end, the denouement, if you will, of the whole story arc.
Right.
Just simplicity matters. So a lot of different types of storytelling. So we've unpacked storytelling a little bit. We've talked a little bit about some of the key components and the fact that really anybody can be a strong storyteller. I want to geek out a little bit on kind of the state of content creation today, because your work, you live and breathe through kind of the lens, if you will. And a lot of that is then come to life through digital content. And I know that it just seems like that marketplace is shifting so drastically. How are you seeing some of these changes as you look towards the future of Skalawag Productions.
Yeah, nothing like a prediction to look like an idiot. In a couple of years,
right?
We think about it in a way that I think is really holistic, right? Just like every technological jump or leap that we've been a part of, small and large, it has added to, not taken away from the overall whole. And so there's a lot of fear out there, I think, in the creative landscape, everything from designers to video production professionals to creatives, all of it. The thing to remember and the thing that we're thinking about is how in the short term can it improve our workflows? How can we use it rather than be just shaking in our boots about it? But how can we really leverage it to make things more efficient, to remove busy work, right? Like things that really help us move the needle on things that drag us down so we can be in our best spots. Just like when you're owning a company and you're thinking about like, where do I need to spend my time? I'd like that to help my employees spend time on the things they're good at and their gifts. When it comes to the creative landscape of content creation, I think it's going to be an asset to use. And I think you're going to see a lot of lower level work be replaced by it. Right. But I don't see a full scale shift away from what we do. I think there'll be big changes. I think that the unknown factor is the thing that people are most fearful of. And the exponential nature of the question marks that is scary for everyone, you know? But at the end of the day, like it's happening. So like our thought process is like we soldier on and like we're not being dumb about it. Like we're keeping track of it and making sure it's part of the repertoire. But at the end of the day, we really have to think about how do we integrate so we can just stay on trend and understand how we can leverage it to and help our clients utilize it. Do I think it's going to replace me at the end of the day or my team at the end of the day? No, because I've seen people not be able to implement Excel or anything like that in their businesses. So that's kind of our view on it right now.
I love that.
We'll see.
You know, in the knowledge work industry, we're thinking about it the same way, where we do think it's going to improve processes. It might, skim off a lot of busy work that we might be spending a ton of time in. In your world, I could imagine it bolstering things like B-roll and just like, common footage that might take a lot of time, like you're able to kind of grab. But I could also see it then really causing you to differentiate and like the best content, then the best like real life content, then filtering to the top in a way that it becomes almost premium. And you have clients that are willing to pay for a more premium version than a lot of the kind of crap that they're seeing through AI generated modalities and things of that nature.
I think that's a great point too. That's something we talk about a lot, where it's like the replacement of storytelling. I don't think people are interested in computers telling this story. You know what I mean? And so when it comes to like, and actually we've been using this series, the 77 as an example, that's going to be one of the things that like, it's very hard for a computer or an AI to go out and interview somebody in the neighborhood who you have to build a relationship with and trust with before you can actually get in a room with a camera. You know what I mean? So when it comes to like documentary work and things like that, I agree with you. I think that's going to be very hard to replace. But hey, we need a shot of this intersection in Ohio, and we don't have a budget to go get it, but like we don't need it, or something along those lines. And obviously there's ethical things there that you have to keep track of. But like overall, like it's just we adapt. And like when I'm thinking about hiring, when I'm thinking about the business, everything we think about is like, how can we be adaptable? Because a lot of the time this is a tidal wave coming at you, and you got to either roll with the tide or you're going to get swept away.
You bring such a good point around, we'll zoom in on AI, like the proliferation of AI, almost calling on a more premium version of storytelling. Because there's probably going to be some subpar computer generated storytelling that's happening out there. But that again gives this huge opportunity for us to continue to tell the human experience in a way that technology just simply can't. It's funny because we're joking amongst the team every once in a while. I'll send an email or whatnot, and our director of people and ops, Amanda, will say like, ChatGPT wrote that, and the truth is like it actually didn't, right? And so you can tell that A, technology is getting better, and B, it's challenging us to go about things a little bit differently and add a little bit more of a human element. Let's not, regress towards the technology. Let's continue to make sure that the humans are the differentiator.
I think it moves us more to a place of purpose and intentionality being the most important thing versus the checkbox world that we live in, where we're just checking the box and calling it done because there's too many things on our plate. So now, Do we have the ability to sort of move some of those over to the side and let some of those automation things be automated and focus on what's important? Maybe that's a good thing. And I think just like all technological advances, it's going to be incorporated and integrated. Is it going to be the next War of the Worlds? I hope
TBD.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for geeking out a little bit with me.
Absolutely.
I always appreciate that conversation. I want to end a little bit with outcomes, and we've touched on a little bit of like what is the result of really great storytelling. But this episode is really about achieving better outcomes with storytelling. So as we think about furthering value propositions, solving problems, changing behaviors, how are some of the ways that you measure the outcomes of good storytelling?
Yeah, it's really interesting with our clients because a lot of the time the conversation does end up on ROI, right?
Yeah.
And like, what's my return on my investment? And it's super valid because you have that measure in every aspect of business. And it's something that you should be thinking about and having a conversation about. It's also complicated, right?
Yeah.
And so when we think about qualitative ROI or qualitative outcomes or quantitative outcomes, that's sort of how I think about it. And when we're thinking about qualitative outcomes, I'll tell you one that made a difference for me. Shooting the 77, we did 5 neighborhood screenings in each neighborhood that we featured. And this happened in multiple neighborhoods, but I'll speak to Humboldt Park because Humboldt Park is a story about the Puerto Rican community, first and foremost, and how planting a flag and not getting pushed out to more in different areas was a sort of hallmark part of the story of Humboldt Park. And the leader, Jose Lopez of the Puerto Rican Cultural Center in Humboldt Park, who is sort of like just the guy in charge on the Division Street there. He came up to us and he said, nobody has ever been able to get this right.
Ooh.
And you guys got it right. And this represents what we're about and what we want to do. And it's like, there's for me, there's nothing better we can do to say that we were good stewards of a really complicated story. And so that's one measure of success that, like, if you look at Choose Chicago and the tourism board and the neighborhood outreach and work they've been doing with Rob Foytik, the host and our client, and the CEO and the CMO there that are doing really good investment in neighborhood work. Like, that is the thing that matters, but it's not just this video. It's all the other work too. And so that's part of the conversation of outcomes. In the sense that, like, you can put a video online, but if you don't point people to it, or you don't have the ecosystem to utilize pushing people to watch it, it's like a tree falling in the woods. You know what I mean? And so it's a complicated answer to talk about outcomes a lot of the time with clients, because it isn't always like, well, you brought in X amount of revenue from this, because it depends where it is in the marketing funnel. What is important to you? So you could measure it by views, or you could measure it by full views or engagement or comments on social media. But what's actually an important metric for you to track for whatever problem you're trying to solve? And so for me, to just harken back to the 77 as an example, we're trying to figure out how people reacted to this. So someone from the suburbs that watched this film, this TV show about Humboldt Park, are they more likely to go to Humboldt Park now? And if they are, to go get a jibarito, then we made a huge difference compared to, did we get a gazillion views? It's qualitative versus quantitative. So it's a complicated problem.
I love that, but I think what you just highlighted is a very real outcome measurement, which is when you create and craft a story, particularly about a group of people, can somebody in that group look at you and say, you got our story right? Like, have you told the customer value proposition in a way that truly resonates with the customer? I would also add, and we work with a lot of corporate clients, and I'll maybe go back to a lot of the strategy that we help our clients create. We say that your strategy is only as good as the way you can communicate it. So the outcome of a great vision statement for a team or an organization is not how effectively a leader can get on stage and rally the troops around that vision statement. It's then, can his line leader and his line leader's individual contributor tell the story of that vision statement in a way that's personal to them. So it's all about the engagement, yes, but the stickiness and the brand recognition of stories and how far they filter through the audiences that you're trying to connect. I love that as an outcome. Maybe we'll stop there. There's a lot of others that we can talk about, but they're maybe not as black and white as just ROI and revenue. And that's what we're here for. Again, the human experience.
Yeah.
So Mark, I want to thank you for being a big part of the human experience in the work that you do. I mean, just the examples that you shared today were not your average video shoot. And I just love that about what you're doing here at Skalawag Productions. And we consider you a great part of the Navigating Now community. And thank you for sharing a little bit of your story here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. Well, we want to thank everybody who tuned in today to this episode 284 of Thoughtium Navigating Now Virtual Roundtable Series. We go live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central. You can find this episode and all previous episodes at thoughttium.com/live. And it was wonderful to actually be live here today. So thank you all for